Hi everybody, this is Ryan with Thrivity. I want to take you through a simple way that we like to set up term selection for our sellers that gives them the flexibility to quote new customers, existing customers with unique start and end date needs, and then coterminous situations. So I have a playbook that already has a product selection in it, and right now they can choose between two different products, implementation and software. And you see, that's all that it does. So let's go ahead and add the term selection functionality. So I'm going to start with one question, and let's call that contract term. And we will just ask them to choose from a text list what term they would like. So I'm going to put 5 different answers: the 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. And this can work for situations where you sell it an annual contract or monthly, right? We've been in situations where we sell annual contracts, but oftentimes there's always a unique situation where you need to sell 6 months or you need to sell 18 months or so forth. So give sellers those options. And then I'm going to add a fourth option called other. And what this will be is other, and this is going to kind of point them to the fact that they can select the number of months in the term. So it's called other, 1, 2, 5, etc. months. And then one last selection we're going to add is based on start and end date. And I like to capitalize start and end so it jumps out at them, right? So these are the 5 selections that they'll have to choose from. I always like to default to the longer term, right? To make it easy for them to propose a longer term. So let's go ahead and hit save. And now the last thing I'm going to do before we look at it in the sales side is let's make this conditional. If they're selling implementation, there's no reason to select a term, right? So I'm going to do this as includes any in case we add more products in the future. So anytime the product selection is software, we want the contract term question to show up. So let's go ahead and hit save. Let's take a look at that. One of the benefits of DealHub is it's built in the Waterfall methodology, right? So based on the first question you answer, then you see other questions show up. So if you're selling implementation, no reason to select a term. But if you're selling software, absolutely, you have to select a term. We see that question show up. So now we see they have those selections. Now what we need to do is we need to deal with a couple of things, right? We need to set a start date for the services, and we need to deal with the other 1, 2, 5 month selection, and then the based on start date, end date. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add something called contract term custom, and this will allow us to deal with that 1, 2, 5 month selection. And we're going to call this custom contract term, and the answer type that I'm going to use for this is a numeric answer, right? So it starts from 1 month and it goes to, you could add a ceiling on here, but actually I'd recommend not doing it. If you leave it blank, it's infinity. We found that you've put 60 months, inevitably the next week somebody shows up and they want to sell something that's 61 months. You have to go back, you have to make edits to the playbook. If you leave it wide open like this, no problem. And we will default this to 0, and actually let's default this to 1, and the stepping is going to be per month, 1. So we'll hit done, and then let's just add some logic on here to only have this show up when the contract term equals our other selection, okay? And now let's add a start date. We'll call this contract start date, and start date for software. And I'm going to choose the type of date. And when you set this up, it actually defaults to the proposal date, which I like doing that because it's very easy for sellers to understand that their expectations are always going to be the date that I create the proposal is going to be the start date, and then they can modify it from there. If you wanted to get fancy, you could add a formula. You could take proposal date plus, a week, but keeping it simple allows the sellers to understand exactly what will happen in the quoting tool. And then let's add a contract end date. I'm going to set this up exactly the same way. Proposal date. Now, we need to add some conditions. The start date only applies if we're actually quoting a term, right? So if they're quoting implementation, it does not apply. So I'm gonna make this easy on myself. I already set up this logic here, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it on to the start date. And for the end date, we only need that to show up when they select this last based on start date and end date, right? So let's add a condition on that. We'll put it as rule-based and we'll do same thing. So contract term, if it equals based on start date, end date. And let's hit save and let's take a look at it. So first check is selling implementation. They don't see anything. No contract term, no start date. Now, if we move to software, we should see they need to select a contract term. They need to select a start date. Everything looks good there. They can toggle between these. They can adjust the start date if they need to. And then if they want to select a different term based on months, we have them select that other, and then they're presented with the option. They can select that custom contract term, right? Now let's check the last one. Based on start date, end date, all they're presented with is the start date for the software and the end date for the software. And so then they can go and pick exactly the start date, exactly the end date, mix coterminating, really easy. And then we'll do some calculations on the back end to figure out the term to calculate the price for the software. So that's how we like to set up contract term selection. We found that as we onboard sellers, this does not require any training. It appears to be very intuitive. As they go through the questions, they understand exactly how to run through it. So that's all we have for today. Thank you.